Education is not something that you should stop pursuing in your life, no matter what age you are. If you choose to stop learning, then you will ultimately just be left behind by everyone around you who's continuing to explore the world around them. And that's not exactly a place that you want to be in. Keeping everything simple, let's talk about lifelong learning and the impacts that it has on your lives and your careers as a whole. So let's jump right in. So ultimately, the first question that you would probably ask is, why does lifelong learning matter to begin with? And there's kind of two, I would say, trains of thought here that I would have. And the first one is kind of this idea that if you aren't learning, then you're stagnant or you're dying. And that sounds extreme, but also let me dive into it a little bit more here. Because there is so much knowledge out there in the world that it makes no sense if you don't continue to try to improve your own well of knowledge and your own well of wisdom. And then the other thought here is that why wouldn't you want to continue to learn? Because obviously going through elementary school, middle school, high school, and if you choose to go to trade school, university, you're not going to learn everything you need to know just in those couple years that you're in academia. And I say couple years, but for a good portion of us, it can be a large piece of our life. And that's where, again, these two trains of thought come from, is for me to say that I've learned all I need to learn after graduating. That is a very, very big statement and a lot of confidence that would go into that. But it'd be a lot of false confidence because, again, the world is changing and we live in a time of rapid change and innovation. We should continue to learn because there's so much to know and there's so much that's going to continue to develop throughout our lives. So that's where I kind of subscribe to that first place of I agree so much with that first place, is that if you aren't learning, then you're stagnating. And as with most things, when it's stagnant for too long, it dies. And that's not a place that you should want to go to. You should want to continue to learn no matter what. And with that, that also means your age, no matter what age you are, is not a barrier to you learning something new. There's always something new to learn. There's a new level to explore. No matter what, you're not going to be able to, even if you were, a top researcher in your field, you can't say that you know all that there is to know. Because even a good example of this is science. So the laws of science are just theories that could not be, or that have not yet been unproven. And that's kind of the whole definition behind it, where if you're doing the whole scientific process, then you're trying to take an idea, take a statement, and prove it or disprove it. And the things that can be actively disproven, that's a theory. But there's so much more to explore because people want to retest it. People want to retry it. They want to update it. They want to use new information, new knowledge that's been created or understood and explored to retest stuff, because you want to keep trying and learning and updating what you know. And that's where this first piece comes in, is that because there's so much to learn in the world, it makes no sense for you to not want to continue learning something new. Because again, there's always a new layer to discover. There's always something new to take on. And that may sound overwhelming, but also I think it can be exciting because you don't have to learn what you don't want to learn about. Or a better way to put it is that you don't have to explore the things that aren't interesting to you to the level of depth that, you would have to maybe do in school. And with school, that's also understanding that traditional schooling is only a start. It is one way of learning, but it's not the only way of learning. The whole school system as a whole, the processes behind it are pretty outdated. And for most people, if you YouTube it, you Google it, it tends to be a pretty common consensus here that, hey, schooling, it could use an update. And so that's where the idea that you don't learn everything in school, because there's so much more that's going to come afterwards, simply because that may be when you're getting career knowledge, that may be when you're getting specific industry knowledge, whatever it is, there's so much that's still out there to be learned. And so that's when you can take some of the skills that you've learned from schooling, so some of the ways that they taught you to learn, maybe some of the things that actually really resonated with you, just take it, run with it, level it up in your own way, because You want to make your own personal style of learning effective for you. Because if, say, you were horrible at English, but you were fantastic at math, then it's important for you to learn how to write. Yes, that is true. However, that may not be your top tier skill set. Instead, it may be mathematical equations and being able to catalog logarithmic equations and really dive into the deep details about mathematics. That may be you. And that style will be very different than someone who is very creative focused, very, able to process different forms of language and enjoys doing that. It's a different skill set and a different style of learning that is ultimately why that traditional style of schooling only takes you so far. At some point, you have to take the baton and you have to run with it because your age is not the barrier that you think it is. And also, you definitely did not learn everything that you need to learn while you're just in school, while you're just in university, while you're just in trade school, whatever it is. But this does lead me to the other problem here, which is that traditional schooling for most people, like I will say on average, is either kind of like a so-so experience. For some of us that actually really enjoy school, it's a pretty good experience. But then for those of us that might get left behind or feel like the school system isn't designed for you in the traditional sense, then it can be a pretty bad experience. And that's just the reality of the situation here. So maybe you were someone that was categorized as a slow learner. Maybe you're someone whose style of learning was just different than your classmates. Or maybe you have a specific skill set that was very dominant in one area of study and not as dominant in the others. I've heard many stories about people that will go through and maybe they're super talented in dance and maybe they're super talented in music, and those end up being electives. They're not your core class, and that in of itself can make it kind of hard if you're trying to go through and learn the quadratic function or whatever it is. It's one of those pieces that traditional schooling can leave people behind, and that makes it very hard, especially if you get turned off to learning. And ultimately, that itself is also a big problem, because if you get turned off to the idea of learning, you get turned off because you're told you're a slow learner. You're told that you don't get it, so you must be stupid or something must be wrong with you. That's a narrative that people do get taught, unfortunately, and that's more often than not just not the case. Their skill sets may be just completely different than what's expected or what's utilized, because so much of schooling is a lot of regurgitation of information. And for some of us, that works. For others, that's completely horrible. And then, as I said, because we live in a time of rapid change, if you're turned off to learning, then that itself is just a combination for a disastrous time, because so much is going to be different in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is. The fact that you don't want to learn or you feel that you can't learn is going to put you at a huge disadvantage compared to those around you who are constantly striving to find new information, constantly striving to test their ideas, test their own theories, and compare it against what's new, what's old, and what might be just around the corner. And another conflict people have with trying to be lifelong learners is that it's time consuming. And I will say, to a degree, that's understandable. But on the flip side of that coin, you have more time than you think. Like on average, and this is just me using the phone as the easiest example, is that we spend about 2 to 3 hours on our phones daily, just like over the course of the day. And sure, there's the small little windows of time where maybe you are standing in line at the checkout and you are just scrolling through Twitter, you're scrolling through Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is. And that's, a couple minutes there. But that couple minutes could be, hey, maybe you want to finish reading that article that was, impactful in your field. Or maybe you really want to get back to a book that you're reading, so you have the ebook on your phone, on the Kindle app, whatever it is. But there's a lot more time than we actually realize, especially if we are being very intentional about it. So a good example is me even filming this podcast. So earlier, it's currently, 9:32 a.m. What had happened was I got back to my apartment around 8:30 or something like that. It took me a whole hour to actively sit down here and get filming when I could set up in maybe 5-10 minutes and hit record. That in of itself was a big waste of time because what was I doing? I was literally scrolling Instagram reels. That was it. That was the whole, like, well, not the whole hour, but a decent portion of that was spent just doing nothing but standing there. And that was time that I'm not going to get back. And it was an unfortunate decision, more so because I knew this is something that I want to sit down, film, and talk about today. And this is what I mean when I say there's one, more time in the day than we realize, and two, if we aren't intentional about how we spend our time, we can unfortunately end up in that kind of cycle where we are trading our time, our most precious resource, for a less valuable outcome, or putting it towards something that isn't generating value or a whole lot of value into our moment or into our lives. And overall, we can honestly find time as long as we are being mindful and truly transparent with ourselves about how we're even spending our time to begin with. Like, ultimately, if I were to take your own daily calendar, I would probably find, a couple hours or at minimum 1 hour that you'd be able to dedicate towards some goal, some change, some lifelong learning process. Now, the thing is, I may choose the things that make the most sense to me, but your own situation, your own values, your own goals may actually be completely different than the information I'm giving you. So that's where you have to be so honest with yourself and actually so mindful about how you spend your time and why you spend it the way you do, that you're able to then take a good look at your calendar and adjust it accordingly based on your own values, your own situation, and your own interests. Another good example here is like finance. So for those of us who like make personal budgets, or those of us who have never made a personal budget but want to get into it, someone can come in and say, all right, let's cut out expenses here, 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 and here. It could be, oh, you have to spend less on clothing. You have to, spend a little bit more on groceries, but less on fast food. But then someone else may come and say, wait a minute, no, like, to me, I maybe didn't grow up having access to a lot of clothes or, having this new updated wardrobe. And so to me, that's a value I hold. And then I like the convenience, the time saver of getting to eat out. And so I may not want to actually spend a whole lot of time cooking. These are two conflicting scenarios and two conflicting stories of someone that's trying to make a system based on their ideas and someone's reality that's not matching up to it. And they have their own system and ideas. And this is where learning and finding time falls in that same category. You should be taking an honest audit of your time and your calendar to say, okay, where am I spending my time? How am I spending it? And how can I dedicate it towards a new chapter, a new subject, a new skill, whatever it is? You have to be honest with yourself about that. It can help you to talk about it with others to say, okay, I want to do this. Can you help me figure out how to find time for it? Or it's just really diving into, where am I wasting a couple hours? Where am I wasting even a couple minutes that I could get back and dedicate towards improving my learning and improving myself? And one of the other barriers that people would probably bring up is that it may just not be related to your current job or your overall career. And that's important to talk about as well, because you want to ask yourself, are you passionate about what you're trying to learn? Like, do you actually have a vested interest in learning about that certain topic, that certain field, that skill set? Are you passionate about it, like truly? And then from there, can your job or the career that you have right now fuel this passion, fuel this learning? Because I want to kind of like separate this into two buckets here. Are you trying to learn something for achievement, or are you trying to learn something for fun? And again, the way that you'll approach both of these paths is going to be different, because for achievement, it may be, okay, I need this skill set because it's going to help me level up my career, and I may not have the most fun with it, but I do like my career choice, and this will help me take another step forward, versus, this completely is not related to my job, but it's something that I find interesting. It's something I find fun. I want to just learn about this because why not? And again, it's not to say that either option is wrong. It's just to say that the approach is going to be different. And Even if the skill set, most people want to think, how is this skill set going to impact my career? How's it going to impact my job? Is it going to give me that promotion? Is it going to make me viable for a promotion? Can I make a lateral move? Whatever it is, ultimately, the things you learn don't have to be correlated or related to the job that you hold right now. It could be a future job. It may just be an interest that you have that you want to learn more about. Like a good example I have right now is computers. I'm having fun learning about computers, how to build them, how to take care of them, how to make different upgrades. I built my own, or I actually kind of upgraded one of the old ones I had, or that I got from my brother, and then I upgraded that and made it my work PC. And for me, that was fun. Completely unrelated to the whole idea of career and vocational consulting that I want to do. But it was something that I figured, why not? Because it seems interesting, it seems cool, I'm just going to play around with it. And that's the framing that I think works very well, is letting yourself have that room to not be judged and at the same time just explore. Because it may not be related to your current job or your overall career path, but at the same time, that should not be your entire identity. Your work should not be all that you are. And that's what makes it so important that you do just choose to learn about the things that interest you. So unlike school, where you had to have a good understanding of all the concepts, when you're outside of academia, that's not how learning takes place. You usually do something that's kind of just-in-time learning. You learn about something when it comes up, when it has to be learned, or you learn about what interests you. Because you don't have to be an expert in every subject. You should understand the basics of a lot of different things, but then really dive deep into the things that matter to you, things that are important to you, and that actually hold your attention. Because we like things as humans that we're good at and that we understand a lot of. And so if you're spending time, your precious time, towards things that you really couldn't care less about, you can probably find off the top of your head 5 other ways that you'd want to spend that time that would be more interesting and more fulfilling to yourself. And so have that conversation with yourself, or have that conversation with friends and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about learning, and here's why. Because if it's not interesting and it's not fun to you, you probably won't stick to it unless there's obviously some external force or external pressure that makes you have to stick to it. But it really should come down to what matters to you, why do you want to learn it, and is it just for fun? This also makes me want to stress that you should enjoy the process of your learning. And so, as I mentioned, traditional schooling, it tends to be pretty segmented into, hey, you should know this, you should know how to do this, and you should do it this way. As opposed to the more realistic approach to this of your style is going to be very different. How you learn is going to be very different. And so you should make a process and a system that works for you. It may be completely unique to you, and that's good. So I'm going to use Ryan Holiday as an example here. So one of our modern writers on Stoicism, and his book system, his memory system for cataloging his quotes and different pages and articles is flashcards and huge tubs of just all this information that he can use to catalog it. And then you have Tiago Forte, who uses a second brain, so a system online, a digital system that he's compiled together that allows him just to create and store all the things that he's interested in, all the things that he is fascinated in, and just upgrade his life because of that. 2 different systems, but 2 very individualistic approaches, because their styles are very different. Even if they are approaching the same goal of, hey, we want to be able to remember more, we want to be able to create more cohesive content, we want to be able to create more cohesive ideas, and their approaches are towards that goal. Their processes are different. And that's why you want to enjoy the process, enjoy the journey in your own way. This does also mean, though, that there's still going to be the times where it's not going to be as fun. There's going to be the low points that follow this entire journey you're going to go through. But if you can enjoy the process of it, then those low points become more tolerable. They become a piece of the puzzle, not a stopgap, not a barrier to prevent you from going further. So find your system, create your own system, pull pieces from someone else, or try to make your one all on your own. But do it in a way that you'll come to enjoy it and you'll come to understand your own style of learning and development. And ultimately, I just want to stress that you should make this your own process and make this lifelong learning pursuit your own style, because for the things that are going to work for me won't necessarily work for you. I hope that there's things that I'm able to explain that resonate, that you find to be useful, but ultimately I still say take everything I talk about with a grain of salt, because you should be exploring your own way of living, of thinking, of learning, because the world's not going to stop growing and evolving, and you shouldn't either. The best ways to do that: learn what's fun for you. Don't waste your time forcing yourself to do something that you hate, and also don't waste your time unintentionally. And understand that you can balance out your life, your career, and your lifelong pursuit of learning in a way that maximizes your fulfillment and enjoyment of the process, because the process is truly yours. So if you're watching this on YouTube, comment down below what would be a subject that you want to learn about, whether completely unrelated to your job or related to a skill set you want to learn for a future job. Comment that down below if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're listening to this on a podcast app of choice, then be sure you leave us a rating. That does help the show grow and reach other listeners just like you. On YouTube, make sure you subscribe and like the video. Have an amazing day, you amazing people, and I will see you all in the next episode.